Chapter 1, A Quiet Encounter. Thomas sat on the old stone bridge, his favorite place in the small town of Clearwater. The bridge, with its weathered stones and iron railings, overlooked a gentle river that sparkled in the morning sun. He had been coming here for years, sketching the ever-changing scenery in his notebook. This morning, the river was calm, reflecting the autumn leaves in shades of gold and crimson. Thomas loved the way the sunlight filtered through the trees, casting a warm glow on the water. He opened his notebook, flipping to a blank page, and began to draw. He worked quietly, his pencil gliding across the paper. The sketch was coming together, a perfect blend of nature and light. Thomas was so focused on his work that he didn't notice someone approaching until a voice broke the silence. "That's beautiful," the voice said. Startled, Thomas looked up. Standing before him was a young woman, with bright green eyes, and a camera slung over her shoulder. Her auburn hair glinted in the sunlight, and her smile was warm and inviting. "Oh," Thomas said, closing his notebook instinctively. "Thank you." "Sorry to interrupt," she said, stepping closer. "I didn't mean to startle you. I just couldn't help but notice your drawing." Thomas hesitated, unsure how to respond. He wasn't used to people commenting on his work, let alone strangers. "It's fine," he said finally. "I'm just sketching for myself." The woman nodded, her eyes lingering on the notebook. "You're really talented," she said. "I'm Ava, by the way. I just moved here a few weeks ago." "Thomas," he replied, his voice quiet. He glanced at the camera around her neck. "You're a photographer?" Ava smiled. "Yeah, I love capturing moments, like the way the light hits the river right now. It's magical, don't you think?" Thomas looked at the river, then back at Ava. "It is," he admitted. "That's why I like drawing here." Ava's smile widened. "I can see why. Do you come here often?" "Almost every day," Thomas said. He wasn't sure why he was telling her this, but something about her easy manner made him feel comfortable. "Well, I guess I'll see you around, then," Ava said. She adjusted her camera strap and started to walk away, but then she paused. "And Thomas?" "Yes. Don't hide your notebook next time. Your art deserves to be seen." With that, she walked away, leaving Thomas staring after her, his heart pounding in a way he didn't quite understand. Chapter 2, Familiar Faces. The next morning, Thomas found himself back on the bridge, his notebook open in his lap. He tried to focus on his sketch, but his thoughts kept drifting to Ava. He hadn't expected to see her again, yet a part of him hoped she would return. As if on cue, Ava appeared, her camera in hand. "Good morning," she called, her voice cheerful. Thomas looked up, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Morning. Mind if I join you?" she asked, gesturing to the bench beside him. Sure," Thomas said, scooting over to make room. Ava sat down, her camera resting on her lap. "What are you working on today?" she asked, nodding toward his notebook. Thomas hesitated, then turned the notebook slightly so she could see. "It's not finished," he said quickly, his cheeks flushing. Ava leaned in, studying the sketch. "It's amazing," she said sincerely. You have such an eye for detail. Thanks, Thomas said, his voice barely above a whisper. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Ava occasionally snapping photos, while Thomas sketched. The sound of the river and the rustling leaves created a peaceful backdrop. So, Ava said after a while, breaking the silence, what made you start drawing? Thomas glanced at her, surprised by the question. I don't know, he said. I've just always liked it. It's calming. Ava nodded. I get that. Photography is the same for me. It's like capturing a little piece of the world and making it yours. Thomas smiled faintly. I never thought of it that way. Chapter 3. The Bridge to Friendship. As the days passed, Thomas and Ava met at the bridge more often. Every time they saw each other, their conversations became longer and more natural, as if they had known each other for years instead of weeks. Thomas found himself looking forward to their morning meetings, though he tried not to admit it to himself. He was used to being alone, after all. One morning, Ava arrived early, her camera already in hand, a playful gleam in her eyes. Did you know, she said as she sat down next to him, that this bridge is rumored to be enchanted? Thomas raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. Enchanted? Ava nodded seriously, though her lips twitched with a barely contained smile. Well, maybe not enchanted, but people say, if you meet someone special here, it's meant to be. They say you should always return to the bridge together. Thomas chuckled, a warm feeling spreading through him at the idea. You believe in that? Ava hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. I don't know. I think I believe in science. And this bridge, it's been a good place for me so far. Thomas was quiet for a moment, studying her face, wondering how someone so lively could believe in something so whimsical. I suppose. It's been a good place for me, too, he said, almost as an afterthought. Ava caught his tone and smiled. Good. That's good. She picked up her camera and began snapping pictures of the trees around them, capturing the golden sunlight filtering through the leaves. Thomas watched her for a while, his fingers absent-mindedly tracing the edge of his notebook. You know, he said slowly, I don't think I've ever really shown my sketches to anyone. I mean, not for real. Ava turned her camera off, her attention fully on him. Why not? Thomas shrugged, feeling suddenly self-conscious. I don't know. I guess I never felt like my art was good enough. I do it for myself, you know. Ava's expression softened. But your art is good enough. I've seen it. You should share it with others. Thomas hesitated, the fear of rejection gnawing at him. What if they don't like it? Ava's smile was kind. Then they don't get to see it, but I think there are people out there who would appreciate it. You just have to take that first step. The way she looked at him, so genuinely encouraging, made something inside him stir. Maybe she was right. Maybe he could share his art with the world. Maybe it wasn't just about him anymore. I'll think about it, he said quietly. Ava grinned. You do that. And when you're ready, I'll help. From that moment on, Thomas started sketching with more purpose. He spent hours perfecting his drawings, as if he had something to prove, not to anyone else, but to himself. Ava's words echoed in his mind as he sketched, pushing him to believe that his art was worthy of being seen. Chapter 4: A Shared Dream. A few weeks later, as the first chill of winter began to settle in, Ava arrived at the bridge with a new idea. She found Thomas sitting on the same bench, his hands wrapped around a cup of hot coffee. "I've been thinking," she said, sitting down beside him. "What if we combine our talents? You know, your sketches and my photography. We could make something really special together." Thomas looked at her, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Ava's eyes sparkled as she explained her idea. "Well, I've been thinking about a project where I photograph the places and moments you draw. Maybe we could create a collection of stories, through art and photos. We could even display them somewhere. A gallery, or even a pop-up show." Thomas considered her proposal. "That's a lot." "Yeah, but think of how amazing it could be. And you wouldn't have to do it alone. We'd do it together." Ava's voice was full of excitement, and her energy was contagious. Thomas hesitated, still unsure. "I'm not sure if people would want to see my sketches." "Why not?" Ava asked, her eyes narrowing slightly. "People love art. They love seeing things through other people's eyes. And your perspective, Thomas, is unique. It's beautiful." Thomas felt his heart flutter at her words. He had never thought of his work as anything more than personal sketches, something to pass the time. But Ava saw something in it that he had never allowed himself to see. "What do you think?" she asked, her voice gentle but hopeful. He exhaled slowly, feeling a weight lift from his chest. "Okay. Let's do it. I'm in." Ava beamed, her eyes lighting up with a mix of excitement and pride. "You won't regret it." For the next few weeks, they worked together on the project. Thomas sketched, while Ava photographed. They explored new corners of the town, taking inspiration from the natural beauty around them. Every morning, they meet at the bridge to discuss their ideas, always ending the day with laughter and shared stories. Their connection deepened, and so did their collaboration. Thomas couldn't help but notice how Ava's laughter seemed to fill the space around him, how her smile made his heart skip. He found himself thinking about her more than he'd ever expected, and when she caught him glancing at her, her smile only grew wider, as if she knew the secret he hadn't yet admitted. Chapter 5: The First Step. The day of their first show arrived, and the small gallery they had rented was filled with people. Thomas was nervous, pacing in the back, his hands trembling slightly. Ava, ever the optimist, stood beside him, her confidence bolstering him. "You're going to be great," she said, adjusting the collar of his shirt. "Look at all these people. They're here because they want to see your art." "I don't know," Thomas murmured. "What if they don't like it?" Ava smiled and placed a hand on his arm. "Remember what we talked about. You've already taken the hardest step. The rest is easy." Thomas took a deep breath, nodding. The gallery was buzzing with conversation as visitors admired the collection of his sketches and her photographs. Slowly, he began to relax, taking pride in the work they had done together. When the evening ended, people approached him with compliments. Some asked to buy his work, and one even asked if he would be open to doing a commission. Thomas could hardly believe it. He had stepped into a world he never thought he would be part of. Ava was right. He had taken the first step, and it felt liberating. Chapter 6: The Road Ahead. In the weeks following their gallery show, Thomas felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't expected. People admired his sketches, and a few even commissioned him for personal pieces. But beyond the external success, it was the quiet moments with Ava that left him feeling the most content. The bond between them had deepened since that first meeting on the bridge. What had started as casual encounters soon blossomed into a deep, trusting friendship, and now, Thomas was starting to realize it was something more. One chilly morning, as the frost began to form on the edges of the river, Ava showed up at the bridge early. Thomas was already there, sketching the delicate patterns the ice had formed on the water. "Good morning," Ava greeted him with a bright smile, pulling her scarf tighter around her neck. "Morning," Thomas replied. His voice was warm despite the cold. He gestured to the sketch. "I'm trying to capture the way the ice looks this morning. It's like nature's artwork." Ava stepped closer, studying the sketch. "You're getting really good at this," she said, her voice full of admiration. "Thanks," Thomas said, his cheeks flushing slightly. He had grown accustomed to Ava's praise, but it still made him feel a little self-conscious. "You've helped a lot with that." Ava raised an eyebrow. "Me?" "Yeah. You pushed me to share my work. You believed in it when I didn't." He paused, looking down at his sketchbook. "I think I'm starting to believe in it, too." Ava's smile softened. "I'm glad. But it's not just me, you've got something special. I just helped you see it." Thomas nodded, feeling a warmth spread through him. For the first time, he felt like he was truly on the path to something meaningful. Not just with his art, but with Ava as well. Ava studied him for a long moment, her gaze thoughtful. "You know," she said slowly, "I've been thinking about something." "Yeah?" Thomas asked, looking up at her. She hesitated before speaking. "I've been offered a photography job in another city. It's a big opportunity, one I've been working toward for a long time." Thomas's heart sank, a cold wave of fear rushing through him. "You're leaving?" Ava nodded, her eyes soft with uncertainty. "I don't know if I should take it. It's everything I've ever wanted, but I don't want to leave here. Especially now." Thomas's mind raced. The idea of losing her, even for a short time, made his chest tighten. But he couldn't bring himself to ask her to stay. He knew how important this opportunity was to her. "Is it a good opportunity?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ava's eyes met his, and for a moment, everything else faded. "Yes. It's the kind of opportunity that doesn't come around often." Thomas swallowed hard. "Then you should take it." Ava looked surprised. "What? You're not upset?" "Of course, I'll miss you," Thomas said softly. "But I know how much this means to you. And you deserve it." Ava smiled, though there was a tinge of sadness in her expression. "You really think so?" "I do." Thomas's voice was steady, though his heart was anything but. I want you to be happy, Ava. And if this is what makes you happy, then go for it. She was quiet for a long time, her eyes searching his face. Finally, she reached out, taking his hand in hers. Thank you, she said, her voice filled with emotion. I don't know what I'd do without you. Thomas squeezed her hand, his heart racing. You won't have to do it without me, he said, his words coming out before he could think. I'll always be here. No matter what. Ava's eyes softened, her lips curving into a smile. Promise? I promise. Chapter 7, A New Beginning. Ava's departure was a bittersweet moment for both of them. She left for the city, with the promise of keeping in touch, but Thomas couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. The bridge, which had been their meeting place, now felt empty and silent without her presence. He threw himself back into his art, channeling his emotions into his sketches, but something was missing. Weeks passed, and though they spoke often over the phone, it wasn't the same as having her by his side. Thomas could tell that Ava was thriving in the city. Her photographs were getting more recognition, and she was making a name for herself in the art world. But even with her success, she still called him every night, telling him about her adventures and sharing her latest work. Still, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing from his own life. His art was flourishing, but it felt incomplete without Ava's presence. He missed their morning conversations, the way she would laugh at his awkwardness, and the way her eyes would light up when she spoke about her work. One day, after finishing a particularly difficult sketch, Thomas sat on the edge of the bridge, gazing at the water. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he pulled it out to find a text from Ava. Ava, I've been thinking about something. Maybe it's time for a new chapter. What do you think? Thomas stared at the text for a moment, his heart racing. He typed back quickly. Thomas, what do you mean by a new chapter? Ava, I think it's time I came back. I miss you. Thomas's breath caught in his throat. He stared at the screen, unsure if he was reading it correctly. Ava, the woman he had grown to care for deeply, was coming back. He could hardly believe it. Thomas, I miss you too. Come back soon. Chapter 8, Full Circle. Ava returned to Clearwater a few weeks later. She arrived on a bright, crisp morning, her luggage in hand, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Thomas was waiting for her on the bridge, just like the first time they met. When she saw him, she broke into a smile and ran toward him, dropping her bags and pulling him into a tight hug. I'm home, she said, her voice muffled by his shoulder. Thomas held her close, his heart swelling with emotion. You're really here, he whispered, amazed. Ava pulled back, her eyes shining. I realized that I've spent so much time chasing opportunities that I forgot what truly mattered. She smiled. And what matters is you, Thomas. Thomas smiled, his chest full of warmth. I'm glad you're back. Ava looked around at the bridge, the place where it all began. This place will always be special to me. It's where everything changed. It's where everything started, Thomas agreed. They stood there for a long time, their hands intertwined, the world around them quiet as they soaked in the moment.
Please subscribe for more practicing English by informative content.